Welcome back, episode 119 of the Paws Up Podcast. Very excited for this one. Football is on the horizon. We're so close to college football coming back. For FIU, it's still a little bit ways away. What is it? 8 days? Yeah, 8 days until FIU kicks off their season against the South Florida Bulls. Week 0 is tomorrow. We technically got a little taste of FCS football, but this is episode 119. This is not the Paws Up preview. It'll kind of serve as both. We'll be doing Paws Up previews throughout the season, but I'm excited to have my guy Brandon Pockris of the League Winners, my coworker, my colleague, my friend. Brandon, I'm excited to do this because I'm so excited to get FIU football back. I'm excited that the season starts on the road in the state of Florida. First 5 games, first time since 2018 that FIU has this type of a stretch in a season where they play 5 straight games in the state of Florida. So what's up? I know you won't be there, but you will be covering a game in the state of Florida, and I'm sure that is honestly pretty exciting at the Swamp. So how we doing? And excited to chop it up, talk some Panthers, dive a little bit into the Bulls and what the season could entail for FIU.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting time, right? I mean, if we're just talking state of Florida, it's pretty cool for at least for my purposes. I've already been knee deep in high school football coverage. It's been really cool getting to see some of the future talent across the state, including some future Panthers, potential future Panthers, because nothing's official until they sign on dotted line. Then even then, but yeah, I mean, we're here, right? College football is here. Things kick off week 0 on Saturday. Things get really rolling next week, and I'm really excited to talk everything revolving FIU and their week 1 matchup.
Yeah, let's do it. So first, before anything, FIU finishes the 2025 season with a 7-5 regular season record, losing the bowl game in the first Responders Bowl to UTSA. So they finished 7-6. Offseason, a lot of movement, but FIU somehow 95th in the country in returning production. They returned 50% of their returning defense. I believe about 43% of the offense is back. Obviously, big losses there are Keywan Jenkins. You lose Alex Perry in the portal, 2 of your big offensive pieces. Keyshawn Owens, who broke the single season record for most rushing yards in program history, now off to the NFL after, obviously exhausting his eligibility. And on the defensive side, you obviously lose almost your entire secondary. Brian Blades, Mr. Clark, Josiah McGrew, you name it, they're probably gone. Brandon, how did you see this offseason play out for FIU? You obviously bring in J.J. Cole. You bring in a good mix of transfers with experience, which is something that I know Willie even told us and has said on many other platforms. Like, hey, we brought in guys, but we're bringing in guys that could compete right away and have already this experience that, maybe we didn't have enough of last season. And now they gel that freshman talent that they had last year that ended up actually playing a lot more than people would have expected. With experience, now you know what it feels like to get to a bowl game, what that grind of a season looks like. And you bring in talent from even the D2 level, the JUCOs, from Australia. They brought in a punter from Australia, and even all the way up to the Power 4 level. And FIU, I think, did a good job of meshing what they currently have, along with adding that, kind of like a cherry on the top of the experience that they brought through the portal.
Yeah, starting with the first point you brought up with the losses, right? It's obviously commonplace to lose players, no matter what team you are, right? You can be in Ohio State, you can be in FIU, right? Seems like every team, no matter what, is losing some form of players in the portal, whether it is a guy that maybe you expected to be key depth going into the season or key starters. And when you look at FIU, Alex Perry is the guy that immediately comes into focus, because if FIU was able to retain him, he's probably the best wide receiver in Conference USA with a silver bullet, right? Like, that guy, you and I both knew how talented he was. We were both screaming it from the mountaintops. It took a few weeks, but he was a key reason why FIU was so successful in the back half of the year, right? You lost both quarterbacks that had the starting experience last year. One of them still remains on staff. One of them is now at UCF, right? And you go up and down the list of this roster, I would say outside of Keyshawn Owens, your biggest losses were in the secondary. You lost a key veteran presence in Brian Blades. You lost a true freshman breakout in Josiah McGrew. You lost Mr. Clark. You lost Victor Evans the third. You know, that's the unit for me where I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, how do you replace that? And like you said, FIU focused on bringing in depth that had experience. It focused on bringing in talent from all sorts of levels, right? And I'm really intrigued how it's going to look, right? Because you and I have made our points clear, and you and I have made our thoughts, and we've read in our preview, which hopefully is out very soon for all you guys to see. We have an idea of what guys we think are going to be those key contributors from the transfers that brought them, from some of the returners, but we don't know until we see it on the field. But I do feel, especially within Conference USA play, really optimistic about what this FIU team can be, because it's not like they got completely rated and they're starting from square zero, right? It feels like they were very specific in the types of guys they brought in terms of how they mesh with the guys that stayed.
Yeah, and looking at the guys that stayed, I think one guy that has definitely stood out to both of us, and we could talk about this right now because we both chose this guy as one of our breakout players in the preview, and that was Kyle McNeil. The growth that guy has taken from one year to another, and obviously, you know, you look at the games that he played, and he was the Panthers' second wideout. Like you talked about Alex Perry, right behind him was Kyle McNeil, and he really came in and showed up and showed out. And I know he, you know, a lot of fans will go out there and look at the touchdowns, how many they scored. He only scored one, and that came in the final game of the season of the bowl game. But that guy really did grow in that year, right? And this is a guy who previously in the previous coaching staff in 2024, he played every single game, but he played it as a special teams guy. He didn't have a single reception, no yards, no nothing. So he comes into 2025 with a much bigger role, you know. And especially you said it yourself, you know, Alex Perry really didn't come on until like Western Kentucky, more or less, like, you know, so they relied on Kyle McNeil, and he's a guy who I think they thought would be their top receiver. And the talk around camp has really been Kyle McNeil, man. I mean, this is a guy who was recruited by FIU, has stuck around at FIU, and has the chance, I think, to really be one of the Panthers' top wideouts this season. And you know, we'll talk about Greg Gaines, but like Kyle McNeil has a chance to lead this team in receiving yards and receptions in general, because he's a guy who would maybe help you out a little more with yards after the catch. Greg Gaines could definitely help you there, but I just see him more as a deep field target and red zone target.
You know, when it comes to McNeil, and this is something that I always love being able to do, because you watch spring and you watch fall. You know, he was very good in the spring. He looks different in the fall. During fall camp, he looked even more explosive. The route running is even more crisp. The deep speed has been impressive. His ability to make contested catches has been really, really impressive. And he is turning into a guy, and I think has turned into a guy that this Panthers offense is going to rely on heavily. And you know what? I think he's going to come through for them. I think he's the type of player that is in the mold of what I think this offense is going to be in 2026. He is an explosive player that can not only get open down the field, but can make things happen after the catch in some of the more quick game elements that are within this offense. I agree with you. And, you know, we agree with each other in terms of our breakout pick. I think he's in store for a very big 2026 season.
Yeah, and just for reference, he played in 12 games last season, so he missed one. And he started 10 of those. He had 31 receptions for 310 yards, one touchdown, about 2.6 yards per reception for McNeil. So kind of that short burst. And I think that's another thing we need to talk about, right, Puck? I mean, you look at what they lost, and we talked about Perry, but the bigger loss you would say is Keyshawn Owens. And this is an FIU team that kind of realized what they had in this player right away. FIU wasted no time making Keyshawn Owens the focal point of this offense in 2025. And that's one thing to keep in mind here, because you lose him, now you're left with Anthony Carey, who's a returner, three returners, Anthony Carey, Sterling Joseph, and Devontae Lyons. Three guys who kind of have a similar, the attributes are kind of the same, but they run a little different, and they have some different parts of their game that kind of stand out. Like with Lyons, it's the speed. With Carey, it's probably the strength. Like he's a big dude who's going to run right through players. And Sterling Joseph, we got a very small look at what he could do in that same Houston game, in Middle Tennessee game as well. So I'm excited to see what that group does, but I think that also means that this is kind of where we can dive into a little bit of JJ Cole, the Appalachian State transfer who was named QB1 just last week. This is going to be a more balanced offense in the sense where they're going to pass, but they're going to pass a lot more than last season. And FIU was one of the worst passing offenses in the conference. So this now leads me to go like, hey, they're going to have to be a little more balanced because you still have 3 good running backs, but there aren't KJ Owens who, again, kind of like what we were saying with Perry, he really didn't come on until maybe a couple games into the season. Maybe that FAU game was really the first one where it was like, all right, they've got something here that they're gonna have to ride, and they did. They rode him until the wheels fell off. Exactly what Willie Simmons said, and unfortunately, those wheels fell off in the bowl game because he really didn't perform there. But before that, they really did ride this guy, and now they're gonna have to find a way to kind of balance things out. Talk about JJ Cole, what FIU gets in the tallest quarterback in the country, by the way, who will start week 1. He stands at 6'7". So this is a big dude, 6'7", like 220 pounds. He played at Appalachian State last year. He appeared in 8 games. I think he started 6 of those. When you read fans' comments, they really didn't hate the guy. I think that they hated was the red zone. He wasn't very good in the red zone, apparently, reading defenses. So I'm curious to see what that looks like. So far, so good for any Mountaineers fans that are watching. He has looked good in camp, I would say. There's been the growing pains, of course, because now it is a different situation where he didn't start the season as a starting quarterback. He kind of got in there towards the middle to late part of the season, and now he has the opportunity here at FIU to really be the guy from the get-go, and they've made that clear. And there was a competition, but I really don't think there was a competition. It's kind of how we put it. Zach Marker is the backup quarterback. Conference USA fans probably know him pretty well from his half a quarter in Delaware. Unfortunately, was named the starting quarterback over the preseason player of the year, who was Nick Minicucci. This now, and he beat him out, and unfortunately just got hurt and has been rehabbing from a knee injury this whole time. But talk about what this offense could look like under JJ Cole.
Yeah, so backtracking a little bit, I think it was the beginning of fall camp. Willie Simmons spoke about how he wants this offense to be more explosive, right? And how they're looking to be, because their personnel, and this even dates back to the spring, they're focused on being a more explosive unit, right? They want more of those big plays. They want to add a bit more tempo, right? Like, and look at their personnel. You have a lot of really explosive elements at not only wide receiver, but tight end, which I'm sure we'll get to, Kevin. They have more of an offensive line that I think is capable of handling that. You don't have as much size, but you have a bit more athleticism on that unit. And you have that at quarterback. So I think going piece by piece, wide receiver room is going to be the wide receiver room. There's probably, in my opinion, 7 guys that I would be very intrigued to see what they look like if they're on the field. I think that room is one of the more talented ones on the roster. It just comes down to how they utilize them, right? Alongside McNeil and Greg Gaines. When do you want to deploy McGuire Anderson and Eric Nelson and JoJo Stone and potentially a true freshman in Barrett Scholes, right? You have a lot of different guys for these different situations that I think can all be very helpful. Even a guy in certain elements like a Tyson Carter, who I think is one of the fastest players on the team, point blank. So it all coalesces together because it ties into the run game. Anthony Carey, I think we would both agree, is probably going to enter this season as RB1. And he did a lot of impressive things last year. I'm very intrigued to see what it looks like with him getting that full workload. And more so than that, because of the talent that they have in the running back room alongside of him, how much of that workload is he initially going to get? And that's nothing against Carey, because Carey, his vision's impressive. His strength as a runner is impressive, which I think has increased in his time since being at FIU. But, Devontae Lyons has impressive burst and athleticism at the position and looks to be a threat on passing downs, right? Sterling Joseph broke onto the scene. Yes, it was against Sam Houston, but he did have the makings in that game of looking like a good college running back. So you have to balance all of that. And there's some other guys in the room that maybe not week 1 or even week 2, but over the course of the year, whether it be a Jaden Mook Ford, who has ridiculous top-notch speed despite being a smaller player, and Justin Compare, who by all accounts, from what I've seen and what you've seen, has had a really impressive fall camp. So it's mix and matching these guys in these different situations and how you want that to tie into your pass game, right? does a certain running back for this team fit the mold of how they want to utilize the pass game? Are there certain situations or game plans or opponents where you want to use certain guys more, right? It's all those types of things that you're not going to really know until you reach game time, until you reach kickoff against South Florida. And that brings myself to JJ Cole, right? I would say in the spring, he was basically lights out. Would you tend to agree with that, Kevin?
Yeah, he was definitely impressive. It was impressive for sure. I mean, considering you look at like what FIU had last year compared to this year, it's a different type of quarterback at the end of the day. Like Keyone was more of a guy who made plays with his feet. He extended plays. Not saying that JJ can't do that, but he doesn't have the same speed that Keyone does. But Keyone doesn't have the same arm that JJ does. And for Joe Pisanski, it took him a while to really get it going, right? I mean, he will admit this to you if you ask him, I'm sure. Those first couple of weeks at FIU in spring and fall were bad. It was really bad for Joe. But I think just throughout the time at FIU, it really helped. And you're probably looking more like if you had to go on the spectrum of like Keyone to Joe, JJ is probably a little more on the Joe side in terms of just he has a better arm, right? But he's definitely better than both of those guys. So I think the sneaky speed and elusiveness certainly comes into play. But the arm, it's the arm. And FIU is going to finally be able to run the quote-unquote air raid with someone like a JJ Cole.
And that's really the biggest thing I see from him, because even carrying into fall camp, right, it seems that FIU can now touch every blade of grass on the field in the passing game, right, whether it be in the intermediate area or whether it be in the deep areas down the field. And in the red zone, he's shown some potential strides in that area. But and credit to FIU's defense in these practices, there's been a bit more of those inconsistencies in fall camp, right? There's been some days where Cole hasn't been as decisive as you want in the pocket, or hasn't been as decisive as you want delivering the ball down the field, right? So you have those elements that are popping up. But I think when everything is rolling, and I think things have a chance to really be rolling this year for FIU, you have a quarterback that can contribute to the run game when necessary, but is going to really be an asset for that more explosive outfit that they want. Now, can that change based on how things look in games, right? If what this coaching staff and what this team thought they were going to do isn't working early in the year, you may see a pivot. We saw that last year. There were certain things that FIU was doing in the beginning of the year that were not working. You eventually reach the end of the year or middle of the year, and with a new quarterback in, they start doing different things, right? I remember bringing it up to you last year. That deep passing attack really wasn't unlocked until they made the quarterback change, right? And that wasn't to say that the initial starter in Keyone Jenkins couldn't make those throws, but the offense was just a bit different when he was in there compared to when Joe Pisanski was in there. So I think with JJ Cole, you and I both have an idea of what this thing should look like. But once again, and it's not trying to be a cop-out, you can only get so much out of operating against your own defense and your own team every single day. It's time for the lights, and it's time to see what this looks like in real game action, because that's when you're really going to see what some of the potential looks like for FIU.
Yeah, definitely. I just think this offense, in the grand scheme of things, I can expect Anthony Carey to run the ball 40 times a game. Like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to see that. I don't think even Willie wants that. And Willie even admitted it. He was like, we ran the ball way too much last season. He admitted this at the Conference USA Media Days. He admitted it to us on multiple other platforms where, like, hey, we did this because we kind of, like, at this point, they had no stopping KJ. No team could stop KJ until they got to UTSA. So I definitely think there will be a good balance in this offense. And I think the biggest change does come defensively. I know 50% of the defense returns, which is more than the offense, Brandon, but like, I think this is the defense that has more questions, right? I know Jovan DeWitt's going into year 5, but you're losing the secondary, as you mentioned. The defensive line is going some change. Keegan Davis is out. Big Sue is out on the interior. You're bringing in a relatively new defensive line group. You're having Kenton Simmons as the returner. That's huge. But after that, you're looking at 2 new interior defensive linemen potentially starting for FIU and a new corner and a new edge rusher. So I'm curious to see, what do you think that looks like? I know RJ Moss is a South Alabama guy. He's looked good. What's his name? Jermaine Carter. You're looking at a competition there at that defensive line spot for sure. And then on the other side, the edge rusher, a guy who's really stood out to me, he's not going to start, but a guy who's really stood out to me is Elisha Baldridge, the Division II wrestler transfer. He was a wrestler back in high school. He if you look at the numbers from the Division II level last season, I think he had 16 sacks. This guy is an absolute beast. Really quick first step, gets to the quarterback quickly. I think this is a guy you could see on third downs for FIU to maybe disrupt the pass game a little bit, and especially in week one against a guy like Michael Van Buren, who does extend plays with his feet, and I'm sure we'll talk about him a little later. This is a guy like Baldridge who has the speed that maybe a Simmons or a Dante Anderson doesn't have. Dante Anderson, another guy who's going to fight for that starting edge job. And then you have, what's his name, DJ Holmes, the Ole Miss transfer, who seemingly seems like he's going to win the job along with Kenton Simmons as the other edge rusher. That's something I've really looked at this spring and fall park. Like, that defensive line is certainly, like, interesting to look at, because they're going to rotate. They're going to rotate a lot. There's no set starter. It's not like last season at all.
Yeah, that's another aspect that Coach Willie Simmons, was adamant about, that he feels like they have more depth in that defensive line room, that he feels like they can play way more guys in actual game situations than they could last year. Now, the biggest thing is, and we will talk about this when it pertains to the game against USF, against South Florida. We don't know how it looks yet as a unit, right? How the individual guys have flashed, right? Like DJ Holmes, I think, has been really impressive. Baldridge, I remember the one scrimmage I was in attendance for. He was getting after the quarterback and making plays against the run very consistently, right? Ken Simmons is getting a lot of preseason recognition, and well-deserved. I think he's a very, very talented player that should be a huge asset returning to this FIU defense this season. And then Dante Anderson is a guy that I think really came on strong last year at the end of the year, and I think can continue that progression into the season. But you're breaking in a lot of guys that weren't necessarily starters, that didn't play together in real game situations. They've built that progress, and they've had some really good days in practice. You're going up against a USF team that's filled with size and upper tier talent, right? For different reasons that end up at South Florida, but it is a offensive line that's going to have a ton of size, and it's going to be running a lot of pro style stuff. It's going to be putting a lot of pressure immediately on that new FIU defensive line, right? And you get to linebacker. I think linebacker is going to be potentially one of their stronger groups. You return Percy Courtney, you return Josiah Taylor, you have Pickle Stewart, who, as you know, I've been very high on, and I think is going to make an impact for them when he gets on the field this year. Outside the defensive line, which has the talent, but I have some of those questions about how they mesh together in those game situations and how they look over the course of 4 quarters. That secondary is going to be tested immediately, right? It is the position group that is kind of I wouldn't say a red flag, but it's probably the one I had the yellow flag on, and has nothing really to do with the guys themselves, because I'm sky high on Lawrence Johnson. I think he's been phenomenal in spring and fall camp. Ryan Gadsden's been really impressive, and Shamir Sterling has been awesome in fall camp, and I don't think there's any other way to put it. But you are breaking in so many guys in a position room that the standard was up here last year, right? Especially in the back half of the year once FIU started getting rolling, right? You're breaking in so many new guys in the position room when 2 of your first 3 opponents are a South Florida team that has a lot of guys that were highly regarded as recruits and have a lot of upper tier talent. And in week 3, an air raid system against FAU that is going to test that room every single play, no matter what, and has key returners at wide receiver, plus a Texas Tech transfer and Kelby Volson, who that staff is sky high on. So, I think with it being almost or essentially a week out from the game, I think where I'm coming to when it comes to, my questions, I've seen everything I've needed to see from this team against each other, right? One unit hasn't dominated throughout the course of spring or fall camp, right? Both sides have made a bunch of plays. Both sides have flashed their talent. There's standouts in every position room. I'm just ready to see it on the field. I'm ready to see what it looks like in real game situations, because that's when we're really going to be able to make our judgments, Kevin. That's when we're really going to be able to be like, hey, is this team good or not in this area? Where is this team in this area compared to last year, right? Because we know what the 2025 FIU Panthers look like. That's the team that broke the bowl curse or the bowl drought, right? That's the team that had the running back who worked in an NFL training camp. That has the, defense, the secondary, where 4 of the 5 starters are at the power 4 level. Excuse me. What is this defensive unit specifically going to look like, and this overall team going to look like? I have my optimism, and you know that, but it's time to see it on the field.
Agreed. And one guy I definitely want to continue to highlight is Ryan Gadsden. Like, you begin to look at that guy playing, and like the numbers at Lafayette are like, this guy probably should have gone to a Power 4. Like, it was 67 total tackles, 3 interceptions, first team all conference at the Patriot League, where Joe Pizanski came from, funny enough. The fact that FIU got this guy is honestly a luxury, I got to say, because this is a really good player, but it also shows the work that Willie Simmons, Jovan DeWitt, and that coaching staff have done, and the vision that they had for this type of guy. So Gadsden, great get. Linebacker room, I feel like, is as deep as it's ever been. Last year, you were really relying on Josiah Taylor and Percy Courtney. Outside of that, you really didn't have a lot. So you add a Pickle Stewart, you add a Brayshawn Littlejohn, who comes with quite a bit of experience from the Sun Belt Conference. I'm a big fan of him. I think he's really good. I honestly think he should start, to be honest with you. Josiah Taylor, year 3 in this system under Jovan DeWitt, really made a big jump from year 1 to year 2, just solely because he played more. He played kind of like a Kyle McNeil. Josiah Taylor in 2024 was primarily a special teams guy. So now you look at 2025, he really broke onto the scene. And when Percy Courtney went down, he had to come in and he had to step in. So I'm excited about this linebacker group. That's probably one of the groups I'm most excited about, just because of what they could show and what they have shown. And honestly, you don't really think of linebacker picking off, throws and all that stuff. Like, this linebacker group has shown that Brayshawn Littlejohn in spring was one of the most exciting players to watch, because you felt like he was going to get a pick every day. And then you have Josiah, who's had a couple picks in the fall. So I'm really excited about that group. You look at safeties. I think that is another very deep group, Brandon, because it's not that it's a lot of new guys, and there was some turnover in that group. No doubt about it. Websley Etienne retired. Josiah McGrew gone. Like, the way I see it is like, you brought in a lot of guys with experience. Demetrius Hill's back this season. And I think he's a guy who had a really good spring. Unfortunately, just hasn't shown it in the fall, but he's going to be part of that rotation. A guy who I'm extremely, extremely, extremely excited about is Wesley Miller. That guy's going to be really, really good for FIU. The fact that they were able to get that guy out of the portal after back-to-back almost 60 total tackle seasons, getting interceptions, doing what he's done, is very impressive. I'm excited about that group. I'm excited about Wesley Miller. I really think he can break out in this conference. DeAndre Boykins is a very interesting name too. I actually ran into him the other day on campus. Very nice guy. And you look, a couple years ago, this was one of the better players on that UNC defense. Now, unfortunately, just went down at Oklahoma State, couldn't play last season, and he has an opportunity to really break out here at FIU. I think he's kind of be playing like that rover spot. He's kind of going to be moving all around the field. And one thing I want to get your thoughts on, Pac, and we kind of talked, we saw this recently. Kenton Simmons kind of playing back in coverage a little bit and a couple times. What do you think about that? What do you think of that move? Honestly, that's something that we didn't see last season, but he almost had a pick, and he's certainly been good.
We kind of talked about it, and I'll start with that point first. It wasn't just him that's been doing that. I think that's more of a schematic element that might be incorporated with FIU, and I'm fascinated to see if they do it once that situation arrives in the red zone specifically this season and once we arrive at week 1. But yeah, I mean the safety room, Wesley Miller's made a lot of plays in fall camp. I'm really excited to see what he can do on the field. Operating with that gigantic arm brace a little bit. It's been cool seeing that. I think that adds to the aesthetic a little bit for a guy that plays safety, a guy that comes downhill and has to hit people. But yeah, Josiah Taylor is one of my favorite players on this entire team from a pure talent perspective. Just, I think he can be that true game changer, right? There's a few positions on the football field that if you have upper tier guys, especially in this Conference USA, it makes all the difference for your team. Obviously, quarterback goes without saying. If you have a great quarterback, you're probably going to have plenty of success. Tight end's another position where I think that's the case, and we haven't touched on that, but I think between James Reesar, between Jackson Verdugo, and I think even if a guy like Aiden Passley has to get on the field, I think FIU's in a really damn good spot when it comes to that position. And then that one of those other positions is linebacker. And Josiah Taylor came on really strong last year with another year of experience under his belt, and heading into fall camp and with all that experience already playing in this system, he's looked phenomenal. He's been everywhere, right? He's making leaping interceptions, stops against the run, great coverage reps, great run defense reps. Like, I really think if it's not in the beginning of the year, and I think it will be in the beginning of the year, he's going to be phenomenal in conference play, and he's going to be a key reason why FIU is competitive this season.
Let's talk about those tight ends, because that is a room that underwent a lot of change. You see Justin Cayenne, he's out of eligibility. Braden Staten retired. Dallas Payne entered the portal and then didn't go anywhere, so I'm assuming he just never got another year, and he's done. So you return Jackson Verdugo, you return Sean Burke, but through the portal, you bring in James Reesar, who was somehow put as a 32 overall in the EA game. I don't know if you saw that.
It was a glitch.
To be clear, I was told it was a glitch. Exactly. I was going to say that is an error. He actually has very good stats in the game itself, like very good attributes, apparently. I don't play this game. I've never played a snap of this game, but I was, I've seen it, like, whatever. But he's on there. He's a JUCO guy who went from quarterback to tight end. I'm really excited about him. Another guy who I know you're very excited about, and quite honestly, he has caught my attention throughout the spring, and I appreciate that he brought him up. It was Aiden Passley. He's an incoming freshman from Jupiter High School, I believe.
Yes.
So then FIU also brought in Byron Brown's brother, Davis Brown. He's probably not going to be a big factor this season just because of how much depth there is at that tight end room. Kevin Schaefer, a Rhode Island transfer. He is the old man of the group. He's quite old, but that also means that he comes with quite a bit of experience, and he definitely has that. And you know what? One fun thing about Kevin Schaefer is that he had 2 receptions last season. Both of those receptions were touchdown receptions. So if you throw it his way, it could potentially be a touchdown. Now, I think he's going to be used more in the blocking game, and I also think that he may be out for week 1 because he has yet to actually participate in any camp for FIU. He did not participate in the spring, and he did not participate in the fall yet. He was suited up. He was no longer in a boot. He was no longer in street clothes. He was actually suited up in the most recent practice we went to, which was on Wednesday. So we will see how that looks. But yeah, that is an interesting room. I think the way that they could use it is very interesting too. I think they could have even some 2, maybe even 3 tight end sets. I would be surprised if it's 3, but definitely 2, where you have Schaefer blocking, you have Reestar maybe on the outside. I really think there's a lot of possibilities with this room, maybe more than even last year, because last year you really were limited, and especially because of injuries. Braden Saint was out, Justin Cayenne was out at times, and they had to rely on this Jackson Verdugo kid who ended up being pretty good. And he's probably going to be your starting tight end, but I could see a lot of 2 tight end sets. And you know what? That's an extra receiver that you have on the field, and with the speed that Reestar has and the football knowledge that he has, because he could beat you with speed or he could beat you with physicality. He's really transformed his body into that tight end body. He's been out for some portions of camp, but for the most part, he's been healthy, and I think he's a guy who could really play in 2026.
Yeah, it's a room that will allow Florida International, FIU, to be more multiple, right? It's going to allow their offense to do a lot of different things, or even a lot of the same things, but through different looks, right? And if Reesar himself has generated some preseason all-conference recognition, right? This is a guy that has the intangibles to be an impact player on this offense. He was a 4-star quarterback commit coming out of high school, right? This is a guy that has pedigree, obviously not at the same position, but he's the type of player where I think if he hits, now you're adding a much different element that this offense didn't have last year. Because you obviously will have the wideouts. You will have the running backs. You got a tight end that you're putting pressure on safeties and linebackers to cover throughout a game. That opens up everything else for everybody in this offense. And you add in Verdugo, who looked very solid in his game action last year. You add in Pasley, who, already had the receiving ability. He essentially operated as a receiver in high school. He added a ton of weight and is still moving very impressively, has shown great hands, just overall great stuff. I think if he gets on the field, he can bring some of that element as well. It's that position, as I talked about earlier in the episode. If you have great tight ends or a great tight end, it changes the complexion of not only your offense, but your overall team. And that's very exciting to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I really think there's a lot of possibilities for this room. And I also think just the size. It's more size in this room than maybe last year. And who knows, maybe even Davis Brown could be used. I really do think maybe in some sort of blocking game. And you know what? That's something we could transition to a little bit. The 5-for-5 rule, the 5 years of eligibility rule. There's no more redshirting. And we saw last year that FIU is not scared to play their freshmen. We saw Tyson Carter play. We saw Josiah McGrew play. We've seen guys get into games. They even threw Christian Langford, who's no longer with the program, out there for a play. And, that's fine. So the guy that's been turning all heads, Brandon, and I think we got to talk about this kid, is Barrett Scholes, Lake Mary freshman product, whatever you want to call it. Like, this guy has made plays. He's, I believe, 6'5". He's still quite skinny. He's going to have to put on some weight, but I think that'll come as we go. And maybe now less practices out in the hot Florida sun every day will help. But hey, look, this is a guy whose catch radius is probably unlike most receivers on this team. And it's a guy who continues to make plays, and they're kind of forced to use him. And with no redshirting and no need to take account of 4 games, they're not going to sit him out. They're going to play him. And FIU's shown that they're not scared to play freshmen. And this is, I think, if you look at the entire freshman class so far, this is one guy who, will be it. This is the guy who's going to play the most, I think. It's between him, maybe Courageous Hayes on defense, but this is the guy. Barrett Scholes is the guy, and I could see him as a deep threat target. He has shown some ability with yards after the catch, but I also think he can be used in the red zone.
We've talked about it before. With the elimination of this 5-for-5 rule, and we've asked the coaching staff too. This is now something where elimination of 5-for-5 rule, implementation of the 5-for-5 rule. This is something where you can truly just play your best guys. And over the course of fall camp, there's been plenty of first-year players that have really flashed. I talked about Compare at the running back position and Ford at the running back position. Whether it be Eric Johnson, Jakari Johnson, Dominic Turnbull, Courageous Hayes, those secondary guys, they're not going to have to be forced into action. But if they were forced into action, I wouldn't feel, worried about their ability to produce. And I think if any of those guys are getting on the field, add in Jamani Chinsur as well, I think it would mean the coaching staff is confident in their abilities, and that's always a good sign, right? At wideout, before I get to Scholes, Malik Penson has been great as well, right? He's made a ton of plays and looks to be a future contributor with his former high school quarterback and soon to be teammate in Zach Katz being committed here as well. Think that is a fun combination that Panthers fans could potentially be looking forward to in the future. When it comes to Scholes, there's just this innate ability and refinement to attack the ball in the air for a freshman that I just simply haven't seen in a while, right? It's the ability for him to go up and make plays and have the body control, and even the route running and speed has been impressive for someone of his size. The amount of plays that he's made in fall camp, there's something to be said about getting to a point where you can't keep him off the field. There's something to be said about you have this immediate impact red zone threat that can help you. And the only reason that you wouldn't play him in those situations is, at least in previous years, we don't want to burn his eligibility. Like, I think that's exciting, and it's an exciting element for an offense that, outside of Alex Perry, really didn't have that last year, right? It adds another element that, especially in Conference USA, other teams are going to have to account for. And that's going to be something really, really interesting to see as this year goes on. I think I agree with you. There are some other guys that I think will eventually see the field for this team. But I think right off the bat, Scholes is that freshman, that first-year player that's going to get that burn initially.
100%. And you know what? I'm excited about it because I think it just provides another look that we haven't had in previous years. Like, Perry was a big dude, don't get me wrong, but I just think Scholes is a little different. I just think he's a little different in terms of the size. I think just a little bit faster than what Alex Perry is, even faster than I think Greg Gaines. But we're coming up to we're just over 40 minutes. So I want to take a look at the schedule. It is a very interesting schedule. I think it's a very favorable schedule. I think you look at those first 5 games, FIU's at a total advantage in all of those because they're in South Florida. I mean, they're in Florida. You can't complain about that. And of those 5 games, 4 of them are in South Florida. They start at USF, then they come back home for Buffalo. They go to Boca Raton for the Shula Bowl, come back home for LIU, then New Mexico State, and you don't travel until very late into the season. You don't get on a plane until very late into this quote-unquote season. So I'm excited about that. I don't know what your thoughts are, but what are your thoughts on the schedule? I look at the home schedule, and they should go 6-0. Like, it is a very, very, very favorable home draw, and it gives the Panthers an opportunity where, like, hey, we go 6-0 at home. That's it. We're in a bowl. Now it's just a matter of how many of these road games can we steal? Because, to be fair, the road schedule is extremely tough. You have Liberty, you have Jacksonville State on the road, Kennesaw State, Delaware, who many consider the 4 best teams in this conference, right? And Kennesaw maybe took a little bit of a step back, but Liberty reloaded. Jacksonville State continues to return guys from the previous year. Liberty reloaded. Delaware returning almost highest return rate in the conference. So I find this to be a very interesting schedule. I'm more excited for the non-con. I don't know if it's just the itch of, like, let's get this going again, but I'm excited for this USF game. This is a game that really excites me. I think it's a good test right away for this FIU team. Last year you had to start against Bethune, then you had to go to Penn State. You go from one end of the spectrum to the other. Really didn't get a true test until the FAU game in week 3. FIU with a great opportunity right away, week 1. And you know what? I appreciate that the FCS game is the last one in conference play. Non-con, because I appreciate I appreciate that you get to get a good look at this FIU team before that. And you know what? If you're at a 1-2 in the season, which is very possible, you go into that LIU game with an opportunity to get back to 500 right before conference play.
Yeah, it's a very interesting slate. I'm sure that we'll talk more about this South Florida game, and I'll bring up some key points in a minute. But just looking at your conference slate, right? You get a home game against New Mexico State, right? You have to go on the road to Jacksonville State, but then you get Middle Tennessee at home, have to go to Liberty, and then you get Missouri State at home, and Sam Houston at home. Like, essentially, you add in some of the non-conference games. Like you said, you got to win all those home games, and you set yourself up in a very good position to have success this year. And I think that they have a chance to go into Kennesaw State and beat Kennesaw State, right? I think they have a good chance to go into Jacksonville State and beat Jacksonville State. That Liberty game, in theory, it should be a test with how Liberty looked on paper this season. Liberty was not good last year. I think you have a shot to win that game, right? Conference USA is one of those conferences, in my opinion, where, everything is wide open all the time. Like, there's never, outside of a few sporadic years, there's never just one team that is head and shoulders above the rest in most seasons, right? It's always a competitive conference where there's a lot of teams in contention, and FIU needs to be one of those teams again this year. And I think they will, right? But brings us to week 1 and how you set the tone against a very talented, albeit new roster in South Florida, it's not the end all be all. It is week 1. You have so much time to grow. FIU was not the same team it was in week 1 last year as it was in the bowl game last year or the final week of the regular season last year. I'm very intrigued to see how they handle the size in the trenches. That's been a main question of mine on both sides of the ball, specifically the offensive line. I'm really interested to see how this FIU offensive line, albeit with some returning pieces, it's a new unit working together in concert, how they handle a South Florida defensive line that brought in a lot of size and a lot of guys that are going to put pressure on FIU and facing a defensive scheme that is going to consistently try to put the Panthers offense in tough situations. Then on the defensive side, how do you defend the run? That was something that wasn't always great for FIU last year. Do you now have the ability to consistently shut down the run game against a, in theory, superior opponent? Is your secondary up to the task against a very talented wide receiver room, right? I think how those questions are level set is going to be a nice insight into what the talent level of FIU looks like. And it allows you to carry that into the Buffalo game. Then it allows you to see another measuring stick against a team you beat last year in FAU. What do all these things look like against an FAU team that has brought in a lot of talent and has refined key elements that weren't good for them last year? So I think the coolest thing about this schedule, in my opinion, when I truly look at it from that 30,000 foot perspective, is that between the South Florida game, the USF game, right? The Buffalo game, the FAU game, those first 3 games, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what this team looks like in the beginning of the season and what they're going to be heading into conference play. Because you're going to change over the course of conference play, right? You're facing the teams that matter the most in terms of your season. You're facing the teams that matter more than anything. Some of your scheme and game planning may change. Some of what you do may change. That's why I think it's so important to get those measuring stick games out of the way, because then it allows you to make those adjustments and improve.
And I also think this is a good opportunity for them too, because this is year 2. This is year 2 of Willie Simmons. This isn't year 1 where literally everyone is kind of
yes,
building for this conference play and a little confused or whatever. This is year 2. Everyone should know what their job is, what their role is. And even if you have new guys, those new guys have experience and know what this looks like, regardless of, and you know what, a good example of this is JJ Cole. JJ Cole had to go with a new coach last year. This is a new head coach at App State, or was a new head coach last season. So now he has an opportunity here to really change things up. So I'm a big fan of the schedule. I'm a big fan of how it played out. I think it's a good opportunity for FIU. In the preview, you said 9-3. I went 8-4. That's making a bowl game clearly, and it's competition for the CUSA championship game.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think your baseline has to be 7 wins with this schedule, right? Yeah. You cannot be worse than you were last year. Yes, you lost players. Yes, you lost key contributors. You did not lose as much talent as some of these other teams in the conference. Like point blank. There are some other teams in this conference that got completely rated, especially teams at the top of the conference that lost even more key contributors than you did, right? And like you said, it's year 2. You won that amount of games last year. It's time to raise the bar, right? The whole idea is building the foundation and building what this FIU program is supposed to be. You can't get stagnant in year 2. Things have to be rolling at a higher level.
Yeah. Alrighty then. We are going to do a quick, let me find it, look around the conference. We have a lovely slate of games. We're going to look at week 0 and week 1 because, of course, it's just how it goes. Conference USA does have week 0 games, and we're going to predict them. We're going to predict who's going to win. Obviously, FIU, USF will do that at the end. We have Delaware and Merrimack. You're close. You live pretty close to Delaware, right, Pac?
Yeah, I'm a Jersey boy. Northeast till I die, baby. Yeah, that's all me right there.
Yep, Blue Hens hosting Merrimack. I think the Hens win this one pretty easily, honestly.
Yeah, I think Delaware with Nick Minicucci returning a quarterback, Joe Silver returning at running back. Like I think this offense is going to put its mark on the season immediately. I doubt Delaware's going to win this one easily.
This one, unfortunately, I don't think will go well for new head coach Casey Wood at Missouri State. They're going into Texas A&M. College Station at night, not good. Aggies win big on this one.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Missouri State is one of those teams. They were frisky last year. Like they did some impressive stuff, but you lose your head coach to Coastal Carolina, and you lose a lot of key contributors. This is bound to happen. And even if they had all those things, playing Texas A&M is a tall task. They are not winning this one.
Thursday game, Kennesaw State hosting, I believe this is the University of West Georgia. Kennesaw State will win. They underwent some change, but they keep Jerry Mack, who had a lot of head coaching interest in this most recent cycle. But we'll see. It's a good opportunity for, I guess, Ricky Collins, the Syracuse transfer, to kind of get his feet under him and get things going there in Kennesaw, Georgia.
So Kennesaw State, I think, will win this one, but keep an eye on West Georgia. They're one of those FCS teams that they can make a little bit of noise, and they're not one of those complete pushovers. I'm interested in this game, watching it with a little bit of focus.
Let's go on to the next one. Unfortunately, I think this one's not going to go very well for New Mexico State and Tony Sanchez over there. They're going to Doak Campbell Stadium against FSU. FSU is not a very good team, I think, overall. They're not going to have a very good year, but I think they will start off with a big win against the Aggies. But I will say, I don't know why I feel like this game could be closer than people expect.
Yeah, I think Florida State wins this one pretty handily, but it would be very interesting for New Mexico State to put a scare into Florida State to kind of rattle things right at the start of this season.
Derek Mason probably fighting for his coaching job here this season for the Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders. They're hosting Murray State in the first game Saturday at 7 p.m. I've got the Blue Raiders, but for some reason they play these FCS teams so close, and they have for the last couple of years. I think this one will be a little closer than people expect.
Yeah, I would be in agreement with you on that fully.
Sam Houston State goes to Troy. They play the Trojans of the Sun Belt Conference. I've got Troy winning this one. Sam Houston did improve. They do keep some key guys. They have their quarterback, Brandon Locke, who I think was a pretty solid player. I know FIU tried to get him a couple years back when he was in his high school recruitment. But I think the Troy Trojans end up defeating Sam Houston. I think it'll be a little closer than people expect. I always feel like these week one games are a little bit closer than people will expect just because, again, these teams are on their first week getting things going. But I think Troy's going to win. I think Sam Houston will be better than last season, but still just not ready to compete yet.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you there. I think that Troy is one of those teams that can be pretty solid in Sun Belt play this year, but I also don't think Sam Houston is going to be nearly as bad as they were last season. I'd say probably Troy by 10 points or so in this game, maybe 2 scores.
Jacksonville State goes to Fargo, I believe, facing North Dakota State, one of the former FCS powerhouses, who is now, I believe, in the Mountain West. So that'll be a fun matchup. I think this is a very interesting matchup. I think Jacksonville State just wins, but this is going to be a very fun game, in my opinion. And this one we get in week 0. So you're watching this on Friday. We'll get this one tomorrow at 5:30.
In a week full of chalk picks, for the most part, I am going against the grain, and I'm going to go with North Dakota State. I think that the Bison make an impact and a presence in their first FBS game.
I like that. I forgot to add a day and time for this Western Kentucky game, but this is by far the latest game of the college football slate and on next week, Saturday. They're going to Nevada. This is a 10:30 game, so this is a very late game. Western Kentucky always seems to have a very solid team, regardless of change, offensive coordinator change. They have a new OC in the house. That they still have Rodney Tisdale as their starting quarterback, who was the Conference USA Freshman of the Year. Nevada's always a solid team under Jeff Choate. I think Western Kentucky wins this one, though, and I think it'll be a very close game. Western Kentucky always gets off to these slow starts. I think they'll be fine in this one, and they'll defeat Nevada starting off 1-0.
This will be a fun game. I think these late night West Coast games are always fun and they're chaotic and everything in between. But I have Western Kentucky narrowly defeating Nevada in this game.
I'm excited for this last game. This maybe 2 years ago, this would have been like the G6 game of the year. Liberty versus James Madison on the road. James Madison already came to Liberty last year. I believe the Dukes won that one. But Liberty's reloaded, man. They've reloaded. Deshaun Purdy's at quarterback. They have 3 guys who are on the best running back in college football watch list. They have Cam Davis, I believe. They brought in a Duke transfer. Like they're loaded at running back. If anything, Liberty's going to run the ball a lot. And we talk about FIU and how they brought in these good, experienced FCS receivers in general. Liberty brought in 3 of those guys. Their offense is reloaded. It looks really good. I just think it's going to take a little time for that to materialize. This is game 1 for Billy Napier as JMU's head coach. I think Billy Napier wins and just narrowly beats Liberty. I think the home field advantage will certainly play in this one.
Once again, going to go against the grain a little bit here. I am not certain what James Madison is going to look like in their first game under Billy Napier. This is a team that lost a lot on both sides of the ball. They lost their head coach, right? There's so much new things going on. I am very uncertain until proven otherwise about James Madison's quarterback situation. And as a result, I'm taking the upset. I think Liberty gives a statement in week 1 and shows that they're going to be back at the top of Conference USA this season.
I think that's going to be a fun game. That may be the most fun game of the bunch. But we have one more question, Pac. Big game in Tampa at Raymond James Stadium. First game for the last game at Raymond James Stadium for USF as they gear up for their new stadium. The big question is,
first game
will win? Yeah, you're right. First game. Yeah, I am not very smart with that one. I said last game.
You said last game. Yeah.
That's not good. All right.
You need coffee. I need coffee.
We all need coffee. But anyways, Brandon, give us your pick. FIU goes on the road against USF to welcome Brian Hartline, the first-year head coach for the Bulls.
I think this game has a chance to be closer than people think, right? Like, I think this is one of those very, interesting games in the sense of, all the different things coalescing together. I just think that I have too many questions about how FIU stacks up against certain elements of USF's team. I talked about the trenches. I talked about the trenches on both sides of the ball. I think that I'm fascinated to see how the secondary handles this assignment. I'm fascinated to see how really this overall FIU team, this new collection of players, handles this assignment, right? At the end of the day, this is a South Florida home game. The energy will be in their favor. Obviously, that can always go in a different direction, but I think that in the first game of the 2026 season, FIU takes the loss. I don't think it'll necessarily be a complete blowout, but I think that this is just one of those games where there is a considerable gap of spending and a considerable gap of size in certain areas. And I think just for this first game, just because of how week 1 everything looks, that South Florida takes the win. However, don't be surprised if this game is closer than most people think it will be.
Yeah, definitely agree. I'm going to go with USF winning this one. They're one of the most talented teams in the G6. I know they underwent a lot of change, and they're returning less guys than FIU is in general, but this is a very talented
their
team.
Talent level is ridiculous.
Exactly. It's you look at their O-line, it's all dudes that are like 6'5", 6'6", 300 pounds. You look at the secondary. I like their secondary a lot. They're bringing a couple of Ohio State transfers too on both sides of the ball. Their wide receiver room may be one of the most experienced in college football. When you have Kenny Odom, who I got to watch a lot of in Conference USA, and he's like your second or third guy, that says a lot. I think their quarterback, Michael Van Buren, is going to take a little bit of time to really get it going, but I think their defense is what's going to carry them through this week 1 win. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair on both sides, but I think, defense wins championships, and I think although USF maybe has a little more questions on that side of the ball, FIU may be just a little bit not prepared. I just think they're going to be slow coming out of the gate in week 1 with a new quarterback. New connection there, new center, new quarterback. Pretty new targets for JJ Cole. I think it'll be a defensive showdown, and I think USF narrowly wins 17-14. So,
yeah. I think, kind of bringing it back to one of the earlier points, this FIU defense is going to be tested immediately, and this FIU offense is going to be tested immediately. What does that look like?
Yep.
How do they handle those tests? That's going to be very important to watch.
Definitely. So, alrighty, we'll wrap it up here. This was episode 119 of the Paws Up Podcast, kind of a preview for the whole football season, as you guys could tell. So maybe we'll come back next week, and as we get closer, do a USF-centric more preview. We'll see. But check out Puck's show on the league winners. Definitely check out what he does. He's covering all South Florida sports. I think high school too. You're kind of looking at all of college football in a certain perspective there that I think everyone should appreciate. Check out the league winners. Check out what we're doing over at Lemon City Live. A lot of coverage of men's, women's soccer, volleyball already gotten going today by the time this is out. So appreciate you guys all watching. And as always, Paws up, baby.